Hallo, ja, die werkt. Goedemiddag, dames en heren. Welkom op het Passaporta Festival. Een festival waarvan u misschien al een aantal evenementen, een aantal gesprekken bezocht hebt. Meer dan 100 auteurs komen praten over hun boeken. Internationale auteurs, auteurs van bij ons. Enfin, het is een feest van het boek. Wij doen daar met dit gesprek vandaag met Paolo Giordano nog we voegen daar nog iets aan toe, iets heel moois. Paolo, you're already looking at me like what she's saying. We're going to have the conversation in English because we met before early November last year, and I know from that time that, I mean, your Dutch is non-existent.
No, it's fairly good.
And my Italian is non-existent either. So, I mean, we wouldn't be able to have a conversation. It would be an absurd one. And I prefer to talk about this wonderful book.
Let me just apologize, because I saw that there are Italians here. So voglio solo scusarmi con gli italiani che non parlerò italiano, ma se no sarebbe stato impossibile.
Well, maybe you can say a few things in Italian, and I'll ask you to read from the book in Italian, so the people who are sitting here who don't speak Italian also have a sense of what it sounds like when he reads.
So exotic.
Yes, it's so far away.
So far away.
Anyways, dit gesprek is er ook gekomen in samenwerking met Istituto Italiano di Cultura Bruxelles. Is that the way to pronounce it?
Perfect.
Thank you. Let's start talking about the hemel verslinden, Divorare, cielo. And maybe first about what happened in between the time that we didn't see each other. It's been 6 months. How have you been?
I've been fine. I've been bringing the book around a little bit, in Germany especially, and trying to move on to the next one. You know, there's always this very strange time after the book is published. This land where you talk about the book, and somehow you complete it in another sense. So you complete all the thoughts about it, and then only after that, I think, comes the point when you can really start thinking of something new. It's like you have to get rid also of all the words you can say about that story.
It's in a way like saying goodbye to the book.
Yeah. And it was a slow
taking
goodbye
distance,
this time. Yeah.
A slow goodbye. How come?
Probably because I hadn't been immersed in a story before the way I was immersed in this one. One reason could be that it simply took longer. So I had been writing for 4 years, which is a piece of a lifetime. And more than the times before, I kind of felt affectionate to the characters. So I had more troubles than usual to let them go. I always found that a little fake when authors said, "Oh no, I'm so fond of my characters, I cannot leave them." So I thought it was a little cheeky and stupid. But it can happen that you have a sort of mourning of leaving a book, leaving a story that in the end made you feel comfortable.
Could that be because 4 main characters, there's other people that are in the book, but there's 4 main characters, very different from each other, but that they are in a way close to you, very close to you?
Very close, but very different somehow. So we tend to think that writers keep on telling things that are very similar to themselves and describe and build characters that look like them somehow. But this time especially, it was quite the opposite for me. So these characters are basically all the things that I'm not, and they do all the things that I wish I had done and never did, and they have the courage that I don't have, and this way was a sort of alternative narration of my own youth, and that's probably why I was so attached to them, because they were experiencing different things than I did.
So let's try to introduce these characters to you as well, so you know what we're talking about. The story is set in Puglia, which is far away from where you live, for example. You live in the north of Italy. Puglia is in the south of Italy.
It's really the opposite.
Yeah, it's in the hills, so that's exactly what you were saying before already. But what kind of region is? Take us there. Maybe try and describe what Puglia is like and why you set the story there.
Well, Puglia is also in fashion. I don't know if also here in Belgium, but it can be very fancy, beautiful place in the summer. So the perfect place for vacation, and that's also how I discovered it, because the first times I used to go there in the summer, you have beautiful beaches, you have beautiful landscape, amazing food. It's one of the it's one of the nicest places in the south of Italy. So I first knew it as a holiday place, more or less like what happens to the main character of Teresa in the book. She spends her summers there when she's very young. But then there was something about the landscape that made me really fall in love with the place. And I use that expression, and I mean it. Yeah, I really think we can all fall in love with places as it happens with people. To the extent that I really missed Puglia when I wasn't there. And for most of the year, I was just waiting to be able to go back there in the summer. And so I stretched out my time in there in the summers, and then I started to go there also in winter, and I discovered a completely different place. Like, all holiday places like to present as a very clean facade. All the buildings in Puglia are painted in this bright white, but then if you go in February, this white is different. It's all striped by the rain, and it becomes brownish. And this olive trees. If you
stay there longer, that's when you start to discover the real side of the real aspects of
the second thing is meeting people.
Yeah, it's like
making
with people.
Friends.
Yeah.
So people who really live there and who are able to take you backstage and show you how the place really looks like and what the contradictions are. And that's probably the thing that triggered most the novel, not the beauty. The beauty hardly triggers writers, I think, but contradictions do. And Puglia is one of the most stunning natural places that you can visit, but it's also a place where there are big issues about, for instance, environment. There's this big industrial plant it's been a problem. It's called Ilva for decades in Italy. They have a fight over these olive trees who are becoming
infected
sick,
by bacteria. Yeah.
and many other aspects like that. So I started to look into the contradictions and the fights that were happening in those places, and how especially people of my age were dealing with those things. I mean, we have those issues everywhere in Europe. In the city where I live, there are these big fights that's been going on for almost 20 years now about this tunnel that they want to dig under the Alps to go to France. And it's a constant fight. There's a constant conflict going on, but you can find these things all over Europe. So I felt that very faraway places could become something universal with which any European could relate.
Yeah, And that's one thing that has changed since we last saw each other is these climate marches. As a matter of fact, there's one happening today in Brussels. So when we hear the helicopter, it's because police are, and there's more manifestations anyways, but there's one of these youth for climate marches today. So in a way, it is like you say, it's all over Europe and beyond.
Yeah.
It's also happening in America. So you sense that you had to, because a lot of the book is on what happens if young people try to fight to keep what they have, or fight for climate.
Yeah, I'm becoming obsessed by climate change, I have to admit.
What does the obsession look like?
The obsession is very narrow-minded, as all obsessions are. So I become obsessed with, trash and how to deal with trash. Now, I moved to Rome in the meantime, which has a big problem with garbage. And so this has my worry has become much stronger towards everything, and I see signs of destruction wherever I go. So, but what I find really intriguing about this, also these strikes that are happening, sometimes grown-ups are a little dismissive towards these things, okay? I heard, and there was a lot of talking also in Italy, and many of them were like, yeah, they're just kids, they don't even know what they're talking about. But I think this is a completely wrong perspective, because regardless of how these very young people are, competent about what they're talking about, in 20 years, they're going to remember these protests as their first involvement into politics and into social life. And I think that's very important, that's very meaningful, because we all had that thing. And nobody can take it away from them. The sad thing about these environmental conflicts, and that's what something I kind of talk about in the book through the characters, is that it has a very weird relationship towards hope. So we tend to think that at 20 years old, we all are idealists, we all like utopias, we wanted to change the world and save the world.
We can conquer the world even, yeah.
But when it comes to environment and climate change, we know that we are already fucked up somehow. So the problem with that is that you don't really have a hope to to adjust things, but just not to make them too worse. And I think that's a very different way of living in the world and growing up, and it deserves to be explored. That's basically what I wanted to explore. What it happens when a generation has a sort of twisted relationship towards hope and the future.
And that they still want to struggle, because your characters are these young people. They could be the ones that are taking to the streets now all over Europe. They want to fight for climate. They want to give meaning to their lives, and actually they find it in their fight to preserve whatever there still is. You earlier on you said that the book is actually a part of you in a way that you write about the things that you didn't do when you were young. Sorry to rub it in, but so is this something that was there something that you could give meaning to when you were young? Did you take to the streets? What was the cause you wanted to fight for?
Well, the thing that I didn't do was to go down in the streets. We had our own protests when we were teenagers. It was the late 90s. And the thing people of my age were protesting against was basically globalization, which at that time sounded like a very abstract concept to me. too abstract to be meaningful. So I didn't go there. I didn't join those protests. And I thought they were pointless and stupid because they were like protesting against some ghost that I couldn't even imagine clearly. And then 20 years later, they were right. There was the ground to, and that was the moment in which things could have been slightly changed in a broad sense. And I didn't take part of it. I mean, nothing would have changed. But what in the end matters to one person is his or her own relation with these things and ideas. And I feel like I didn't do my part, or really didn't. Even though I write books and I always want to talk about the present, and that's probably the only thing I'm interested into, like telling about the present and giving keys to interpret it. I feel like I'm very slow in understanding the present, things as they happen. It always takes me a while, and I really envy people who seem to be faster in understanding what's going on around them.
You just said that writing a story, you want to offer keys to understand the present. I mean, that's the interesting thing about the book. There's a lot of interesting things, but that you offer different perspectives. Also, the four characters, and then later on, when one of the main characters, Bern, who is a real interesting person, you can introduce him if you want, but he wants to go all the way. For whatever he is set, he has a goal and he goes all the way. All the other characters, they are very ambitious, they want to fight for climate, but then money comes up, or love, and founding a family and stuff like that, and they lose track of the goal they're going for. There's only one character in the book, Bern, who really sticks to his ideas. So I found that interesting that you give all these different perspectives, and it's a fight, it's a struggle that the characters
and
deal with.
Thing about Bern, about the main character, was one of the first things that came of the book. So he was the first born of. He was born before the story, before the plays, before all the others.
As a character, yeah.
And those were the years when I started thinking about the book. Those were the years of when most of the terrorist attacks happened. I was spending a lot of time in Paris, so you could really feel kind of tension there. And I was in Brussels when the day after the terrorist attack happened here. So like all of us in those months, we were all very, how do you say?
Yeah, upset.
Upset, and we felt like something big was changing, and we felt unsure about everything. Then we should really start thinking about how this abruptly changed, and we changed the subject so fast. That's kind of worrying of our perspective. But at that time, it really felt like something was happening. And as I said before, I'm just interested into the present, and the attitude that I try to have when I write a book is to be as open as I can to things that are happening around. So I just let myself be traversed by this fear and anxiety. And I started to think about, and one point that really upset me was the fact that there were Europeans, more or less of my same age, who were leaving from Brussels or Paris or Milan and going to fight a very strange war, and they were embracing very strict ideas. And I started to ask, why? Why do they do that? Why do, as a generation that that grew up very free and with, in the end, quite many opportunities. We could travel. We had all Europe for us. Why many of us feel like they need to have a stronger, more definite meaning coming from outside? And there was one thing that I once heard Amos Oz saying. He said that the gene in terms of genetics of the radicalism is in each and every one of us. And I figure out that I totally agree with that idea. I feel like
even in those who want to fight for a good cause.
Yes, it's not very different. The way difference in the end is how this gene explicits himself, if it does. And that really depends on the place where you were born, the instructions that you have, the level of wealth that you were grown into, the place, and all the rest. So the book doesn't talk about fundamentalism and terrorism. There's none of it like that. It's all transferred to a very different environment.
Well, it does talk about activism, about fanaticism in a way, like how fighting for a good cause can. It's a thin line between activism and fanaticism, maybe terrorism. It can easily be turned into something completely different.
And they don't see the line. As they are into that thing, they are fighting for a good cause, basically. But then things go further and further, and some of them just slip into Berne, who was born and raised in a very limited environment. So it really he misses the keys to understand deeply what's going on around him. So it kind of slips even into the violence of his ideals, because all ideas, even the best ones, can have a tendency towards violence if they're taken to an extreme.
Or if there is someone who is like very charismatic and tells you that you need to believe this and this person is wrong and this one is right, and you just believe it because you don't have any other, like you say, keys to understand. Or you can have books who can give you answers.
Well, most of ideas come from books. Still in these times when we think that books will be will expire and disappear from Earth very soon. But this is not. I mean, this is reassuring somehow. Even if more and more it feels to me like when I'm in these occasions, more and more it seems like those gatherings of the first Christians when they were persecuted and
I'm not sure whether I'm happy with that comparison, but do continue.
Especially for the turnout of the situation. But still, most of the best ideas and the very dangerous idea of humankind came from books. And there is no belief, almost no belief, that isn't based on a book. And the novel sort of reminds of that, but it also reminds of a more personal thing, because when I remember very clearly that when I was like 17, 18, 20, books could really make a difference in my life. I could, if I just bumped into the right book at the right moment or the wrong book at the wrong moment, it had the potential to change my perspective on everything. And it doesn't happen really with movies or TV series or music. We all love those things, but the powers that a book has to change deeply what your vision of the world is, I think has no comparison.
But did you only start reading when you were 16, 17?
No, but that was I started very early, and but it was different. I mean, we all have stages as in our lives of readers, I think, no? So up to until 14 or 15, reading really felt like something. I just wanted to drown into books. I love adventure, basically. So the more adventure was in the book, the better. And the idea that books can convey ideas and deeper things kind of came a little later when I was in high school.
Yeah, but when you were an adolescent, this is the group of people that you love. You seem to have a preference to write about, to have these people, teenagers, as your characters. Why is that?
They just look better than adults, no? They are. I like them more than grown-ups in general. They're still
not determined. I mean, there's a lot of things that can
probably
still change.
Because of
Maybe
that.
that's yeah.
We all become so rigid when we grow up. We all become so.
There's a plan set out for us. We have to, like, when you're, I don't know, 22, 23, you have to meet the love of your life. Hopefully, if not, you're a loser. Have to start thinking about raising, having a family, raising kids, all of this. So this what?
Yeah, it's heavy.
It's heavy, and it's a burden for the characters in the book as well.
Yeah, and the narrator, who is a woman, a girl, Teresa, she feels that to a subtle level. She feels that very much. She feels that this predetermined path she has in front of her is going to make her very unhappy. And I remember that feeling very vividly. Like this idea that when you're 12 or 13, you already know what's in front of you, what's expected of you, at least for the next 20 years. So, and you have to do things in the proper order. You have to finish your studies, then you have to find a good job, maybe travel as much as needed, and then go back and think of a family, and then having children. So, because if you mix the places, the whole world is going to collapse, and things are going to end very, very badly. And maybe they really do. And I felt that heaviness very strongly on me, as Teresa does. So what she does is what I didn't do again. When she's like 22 and she's about to finish her studies in college, she just interrupts the life she had in Torino and moves to Puglia, only because she's seen Bern, this love of her life again, and she starts a very different life, a more difficult life with many sacrifices, and she kind of stops the conversation with her own family, but somehow that's reviving for her. Doing this in the real life is way more difficult because you have to disappoint quite many people
around you. Didn't you rebel at all?
Not really. I waited until I was 25, more or less, which is
and what was
way
the rebellion
too late.
when you were 25? What did you do?
I wrote a book.
Yeah. That's a good way to rebel.
Yeah.
What was it titled?
It was called The Solitude of Prime Numbers.
No.
Yes.
See?
Yes. It was a good title.
It was a very good title. And then 10 years out. So that was a good road that you took. Good decision. You shouldn't contemplate anymore about the road not taken, should
Okay.
you?
I like to think of other possibilities. In a way, I think writing novels in itself is a way to think of other possibilities. There's now a tendency for writers to write about real facts that happen in one's own personal life. Like we don't really believe anymore in the possibility of going elsewhere or using the fantasy but again, I'm not really okay with that. Usually I'm already fed up with my own real life, and the whole thing about writing novels is to experience alternatives and other possibilities and lives that are not my own.
Oh, that's a nice way of putting it, because we, as a reader, we have you offer us perspectives or other possibilities of looking at life. But even for yourself, it's like a way of escapism, or is that too?
No,
too
I
heavy
like
a
the
word?
I think I like the word. I'm not afraid of the word. It's not like giving up your responsibilities.
I want to get back to the rebellion. Sorry, but. The book Divorare, il cielo is also about religion, and we talked about.
Say it again in that way. Religion.
There's nothing wrong with religion. There's religion in lots of different ways, like you prove in the book. But it's funny because I remember that you told me in November, and you've told it in a lot of interviews as well, that where you come from, people they believe in God, most of them.
Well, but they are raised in the
Catholic sphere, like
Catholic way,
like
which
most
is
of
very
us are
different
still,
from believing in God.
Yeah. So we do like the ceremonial part of it, but it's not really going to church every Sunday and what have you. But you weren't raised in that atmosphere. Your family wasn't religious, but you decided to rebel against that, and you wanted
that was the first rebellion.
Yes,
actually.
see,
yes.
I knew I had to fish a little bit deeper. So you decided, which is really funny if you think of it, that you decided to rebel because you wanted to become a Catholic.
I wanted to be baptized because all other kids were baptized. So, I did it.
You stood out and you didn't like it, or.
I think just for the sake of doubt, it was fine. I mean, it's better to prevent. So, just my father thought it was just a stupid conformist thing to do. And he didn't realize that he was the one who actually caused that, because if I had just been one of the other kids baptized as everybody else was, probably I wouldn't have cared at all about God and religion. Like most of my mates didn't care at all. They just did what they had to until it was done. But the fact of being a sort of anomaly in that system made me way more curious towards the thing. So, as a parent, you have to be very careful on your choice because they have drawbacks.
It's also about belonging to a group, I think, like you just described it. I mean, because all the others had been baptized, you weren't. You felt like, oh, I want to belong.
You want to be saved.
Yes, you want to be saved.
Everybody else will be saved, and I want.
But it's a bit like what happens to the people, to the characters in your book. They want to belong to a group, a sect, a larger thing, because they're lonely. I mean, a lot of the young people that you write about are so lonely, it hurts.
Yeah, I think we all want to belong to something. And it doesn't have to be a religion, and it doesn't have to be a political belief, and it doesn't have to be a family, but it has to be something. And one hard thing about growing up today, I think, with respect to the former generations 50 years ago, is that we do have a lot of options, maybe too many options. So believing is not really, it's in a way it's easier to rebel against something that you were forced to believe into. It's a more lively thing to do, to oppose against something. But if you just have an infinite set of options, and you have to actively decide what to believe in, which is how I felt for a long time, I think it's kind of harder, because it's sort of unnatural. And these characters in the book, especially Berne, they're trying. Basically, they're trying different beliefs, and they're going to the edge of each of them, and exploring the limits of each one. But in the center of them, there's a void. That was there before and probably will be there after. And to me, that's something very clear, but I don't know, maybe it's just me.
But the novel spans or chronicles 20 years in the lives of, and it's obvious that things change. I mean, if I look back onto decisions I took 20 years ago, I don't even want to look back. I mean, you change, and it's good that you change. And this is the space that you give your characters. You allow them to change.
Yeah, even though I think there is a center in terms of age in the book, so because that's usually how I think about novels. So I have to have in mind a certain part of life that will be the protagonist of that particular story. And to me, this time it's not the adolescence, it's not really being 30, but it's somewhere around being 20. And it came to me as it always happens from other books and other novels, and especially from the first pages of The Shadow Line of Conrad, where he gives this beautiful description of how it feels to cross what he calls the shadow line and enters this second youth. And he describes, I don't know the English translation of it. In Italian, it's translated in a beautiful way. He calls it il malessere acerbo, which would be something like a sense of unease, but not ripe yet, not ready yet. So. And probably those two words were really what it took to start this novel, because they made me go back to, how unready I was at that time to make decisions, to enter the world, but still choices were asked of me, as they are asked of anybody. Like, what do you want to study? Who do you want to be? Who do you want to love? Where do you want to live? And blah, blah, blah. And so at 20, you become very, very, apparently very strong. Many people at 20 are very opinionated, and then 20 years later, you realize that you didn't know a lot, and you were just a little scared and confused. So that's probably the feeling behind these characters.
Yeah, and a lot of things can happen along the way, of course. I would like you to read a part in the book. I didn't really decide which part. Is there a favorite?
Yes, but I mean,
there
is a favorite part.
Oh,
there is a
which
favorite
one and why?
page. But you're going to read it in Dutch, I guess, because
No,
nobody's going to understand anything.
No, you have to like try and set the scene. Set the scene. Tell us where you are, what you're going to read, and then you can read it in Italian, and we'll imagine what.
So open your books at page. Wait. So it's more or less in the middle of the book. For the lady who asked, page 188 in the Italian version.
It's different, of course, in the Dutch version.
There are like 3 years in which this bunch of characters live together in the farm that's the place of the book for most of the story, and they sort of occupy the place without being allowed to, and they build a sort of small utopia there, which is based on agriculture, sustainability, very modern concepts about nature and humans.
Yeah, they have a food forest, they call it. They breed their own vegetables and stuff.
Are real.
Yeah, and they live off the grid.
Yeah.
It's hard.
But then, as you said, money comes in, the desires change, and so this project slowly collapses. And at the end of this moment, the two main characters, Teresa and Bern, who are together again, they find themselves alone in the farm. And there's a moment in the book when a new desire comes through them. It's like this new thought wants to fill the void that's just opened. And what they will do then, and this new desire is to have a child of their own. Like, this can save the world. We didn't succeed, but if we have a child, this will save the world, which is a thought that many young couples have.
And maybe save our love for each other.
Save our love, save our lives. And what happens then is that most of the things they were believing in just before change because they have to chase this new desire. And this is really the page when things change and these new thoughts arrive to them. Quando mancavano 2 giorni allo scadere dell'ultimatum della polizia, lui e io rimanemmo soli. Ci sedemmo sulla panca sotto il leccio. Nessuno la utilizzava più da tempo perché era fatta per ospitare solo 2 persone alla volta. Bern mi strinse a sé. La campagna era così silenziosa e immobile da farci sentire gli ultimi esseri umani sulla terra, oppure i primi. Dovette formulare un pensiero simile anche lui perché disse: Adamo ed Eva, manca il melo. Cesare sosteneva che in realtà fosse un melograno. Allora ce l'abbiamo. Il suo petto si gonfiava e sgonfiava. Poi le sue dita si inerpicarono sulle mie delicatamente. Cercarono un passaggio sotto la manica finché il tessuto le fermò. Andremo da lui domani, disse. Faremo un'offerta per la masseria. Non ci resteranno più soldi dopo. E che importanza ha? Guardai il terreno. La consapevolezza del lavoro che d'ora in poi sarebbe ricaduto su noi 2 soltanto mi scoraggiò. Se in qualche recesso della mente immaginavo ancora di riprendere gli studi, di riallacciare la mia esistenza di prima a quella attuale come in un innesto fra 2 rami, quello fu il momento in cui compresi che non sarebbe successo. C'eravamo Bern e io e la masseria e nient'altro. Avevo 25 anni e non sapevo se fossero tanti o pochi per vivere così, né mi interessava saperlo. Amavo Bern più che mai in quel momento, come se la nostra solitudine improvvisa avesse lasciato spazio a quel sentimento per espandersi e occupare finalmente tutto. Perciò quando lui disse dobbiamo avere un figlio, non vorrei o potremmo, ma dobbiamo, come se non esistesse un'altra via. Quando lo disse ero sicura che avesse ragione e risposi lo avremo. Questa notte? Adesso. Ma passarono ancora dei minuti prima che ci decidessimo a muoverci, a entrare in casa e salire al piano di sopra. E in quell'interludio silenzioso sotto il leccio vedemmo davanti a noi l'immagine di una bambina, la nostra bambina, chissà perché femmina, che danzava lì a pochi passi e raccoglieva un dente di leone fra l'erba effimera e ce lo porgeva. Era una fantasia e non ce la confessammo nemmeno dopo, ma ero certa, come ne sono certa oggi, che la vedemmo viva davanti a noi e identica, perché questo succedeva tra Bern e me in quegli anni. Usavamo sempre meno le parole, ma eravamo ancora capaci di riconoscere insieme il visibile e di inventare, in un tacito accordo, anche l'invisibile. You have to trust me.
Did you write a book with this generation in the back of your head? I mean, when you start writing and you know it's about this generation of millennials, I think, more or less, is it them that you envision that you are writing for, or how does it work?
I think I had a generation in mind this time. It's funny because many people said that The Solitude of Prime Numbers was a book about a generation, which I never thought really was, because to me it was more like a story of growing up, and it felt more timeless than that to me. But not this time. This time I really wanted to portray even a generation and the way this generation has to be political and to be involved in what happens around, because we were the ones that weren't meant to be political at all. We were the MTV generation since the very beginning, and nobody expected anything from us. Everybody thought we would be killed by television. Television should brainwash us before we could even start. But it didn't really happen, and I think there are precise way in which people are my age or slightly older or slightly younger are making a difference, but it's our own way, and the one that these climate change strikers who are 20 years younger, it will be their own way, and nobody should just dismiss it or think it's stupid or less important, because the truth is just that we don't know. We don't know how their way will be, and that always happens.
And it's a very serene way you portray them in the book, I find. It's not judgmental at all. It's just like, this is the lives they lead and the cause they wanna, the goal they set for themselves. I was wondering, just one last question, maybe. Yeah, I have to round up. Was it with the Solitude of Prime Numbers on your shoulders and the success of your debut? Was it hard to start writing again? I mean, there's been books in between the Solitude of Prime Numbers and Divorare, cielo, but still, you think, oh, I want to write something, but it has to be as good as, and if possible, even better than, or?
I don't know if it's that. I was never really afraid of not writing something as good as that, or should be better than that. That was probably not the point, but there was a point for sure. And it took me a lot of time to get rid of that book and the shadow of that book. It all felt like some sort of illness at some point. But it took me time also to realize that it was a sort of illness, and that it was changing my attitude towards reading, writing, but especially towards people in very subtle ways.
Could you elaborate on that?
Could I? Well, it's again something very similar to the things I said about hope. I had the feeling, and it probably was true, that I achieved almost anything I could with that book, but not in literary terms, of course, but in terms of the outside. And so this makes it much more complicated to rebuild the desire of something. So what should I desire now? What's my... it's very simple in the end to deal with how good you are. I mean, if I put myself into that, I know I will take it to the end. That's never been my point in life. My main point has always been, what do you desire? How can you make the desire for something rise again in you? That's tough. And that book sucked something out of me. But right today, I was reading that Justin Bieber is very depressed.
Oh my
and
God.
I thought, well...
You should go to Puglia, no?
Yeah.
Or write a book.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a future for you. You can guide him.
Would like to talk to Justin Bieber and
Yes.
say, it will be all right, Justin.
Yeah,
Just
Just
take
have
your
confidence.
time.
Take your
Yes.
time. Have confidence. Thank you very much, Paolo
Thanks,
Giordano.
Thank you.